I thought my wedding dinner would be the happiest night of my life, the kind of memory I would replay in my head whenever things felt hard. I had spent months planning every detail, from the soft gold lights to the simple white flowers on each table, because I wanted the evening to feel warm and intimate, not flashy. I never imagined that a few careless words from my own brother would turn that night into something I'd never forget for a completely different reason. I'm the youngest in my family, the quiet one who always stayed in the background while my older siblings took center stage. My brother Mark was the loudest of us all, the kind of person who walked into a room and immediately made sure everyone noticed him. He worked in finance, drove a sleek black car, and loved reminding people how successful he was, especially when he was around me. I, on the other hand, worked as a project coordinator for a small nonprofit. My salary was modest, but my job meant everything to me because I got to help people who actually needed it. Still, in my family, money had a way of becoming the measure of success, whether anyone admitted it or not. When I met Daniel, my future husband, he loved me for exactly who I was. He didn't care that I didn't earn six figures or that I drove an old sedan. He cared about my heart, my patience, and the way I believed in building something meaningful together. Daniel worked as a structural engineer, steady and reliable, and he had a calm presence that balanced my family's louder personalities. From the moment he proposed, I knew I wanted a wedding that reflected us, not some grand show just to impress people. The ceremony itself was perfect. I walked down the aisle with my father's arm linked in mine, my hands trembling slightly as I saw Daniel waiting for me, smiling in that soft, reassuring way of his. Our vows were simple and honest, and when we kissed for the first time as husband and wife, the room filled with applause and happy tears. For a few hours, everything felt exactly as it should be. The dinner was held in a beautiful hall just outside the city, with large windows that let in the glow of the sunset. Candles flickered on each table, and soft music played in the background. My family, Daniel's family, and our closest friends were all there, laughing, eating, and celebrating with us. I felt relaxed for the first time in weeks, finally able to enjoy the moment without worrying about schedules or guest lists. Mark arrived late, of course, making a dramatic entrance like he always did. He wore an expensive-looking suit and flashed his confident smile as he made his way to our table. When he hugged me, he whispered, "Not bad, little sis. You pulled off a nice wedding." I smiled, choosing to take it as a compliment, even though his tone carried that familiar hint of superiority.
As the night went on, speeches began. Daniel's father spoke first, sharing stories about Daniel's childhood and welcoming me into their family. My maid of honor followed, talking about our friendship and how she had watched Daniel and me grow together. By the time Mark stood up with his glass in hand, the room was already buzzing with warmth and emotion. Mark cleared his throat, grinning as all eyes turned to him. "Well," he said, "I guess it's my turn to say a few words about my little sister." He paused, looking around the room like he was about to deliver something truly meaningful. Growing up, she was always the dreamer, never cared much about money or status, just wanted to help people, he said with a small laugh. And look at her now, still working one of those low-paying non-profit jobs. But hey, at least she found herself a hard-working husband. A few people chuckled politely, thinking it was just harmless teasing. My smile froze in place, my cheeks burning as I stared down at my plate. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, his thumb brushing gently against my skin, silently telling me he was there. Mark continued, clearly enjoying the attention. "You know, weddings like this aren't cheap, so I hope you two have a solid plan, because love doesn't pay the bills," he added with a wink. The room grew quieter, and I could feel the shift in the air. This wasn't a playful joke anymore. It felt like a public reminder of what Mark thought of my life choices, delivered in front of everyone I cared about. I wanted to disappear, to rewind the moment and make it stop. Then Mark lifted his glass higher. "But seriously, sis, congrats. Even if you're not rolling in cash, at least you've got a good heart. Cheers to that." He raised his glass, and after a brief, awkward pause, a few people followed suit. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to smile as everyone clinked their glasses. Inside, I felt small and exposed, like all my insecurities had just been laid out on the table for everyone to see. Daniel leaned closer to me and whispered, "You don't have to listen to him. None of that matters." I nodded, grateful for his support, but the sting of Mark's words lingered. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I tried to focus on the people who were genuinely happy for us, on the laughter of our friends and the warmth of Daniel's hand in mine. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that my brother's comments had cast a shadow over the night. Later, when the dancing started and the lights dimmed, my aunt pulled me aside. She gave me a gentle smile and said, "Your brother can be blunt, but you should be proud of yourself. You and Daniel make a wonderful team." Her words helped, but I could tell she had noticed the tension too. As the evening wound down, I stepped outside for some fresh air. The night was cool, and the stars were just beginning to show. Daniel joined me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. "I'm sorry about what Mark said," he murmured. "You deserve better than that." I rested my head against his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat, and for a moment the noise of the world faded away. What I didn't know then was that Mark's mockery wasn't the end of the story. In fact, it was only the beginning, because hidden behind all those careless jokes and smug smiles was a secret that would soon come to light, one that would turn the tables in a way none of us saw coming. And when it did, the entire room would fall silent.
A few days after the wedding, life started to settle into a new rhythm. Daniel and I moved into our small but cozy apartment, filling it with laughter, late-night talks, and the simple routines of married life. We weren't rich, but we were happy, and that felt like more than enough. Still, every time my phone buzzed with a message from my family group chat, I felt a slight knot in my stomach, half expecting another subtle reminder of how I didn't quite measure up in their eyes. Mark, of course, was still riding his wave of confidence. He posted photos of his expensive dinners, his new watch, and his weekend trips, always with captions that hinted at his hard-earned success. I tried to ignore it, but the comparison was hard to escape, especially when relatives would casually mention how well he was doing. One afternoon, my mother called me and asked if Daniel and I could come over for dinner. "Your brother will be there too," she added, her voice careful, as if she already knew how I felt about that. I hesitated for a moment, but agreed. Part of me hoped that maybe in a smaller, quieter setting, Mark would be more respectful. When we arrived, the house felt familiar and warm, filled with the smell of home-cooked food. My parents greeted us with hugs, and for a while, everything felt normal. Mark showed up shortly after, still wearing that same confident grin. He shook Daniel's hand and gave me a quick hug, acting like nothing had happened at the wedding. During dinner, the conversation stayed light at first. We talked about work, weekend plans, and small updates from extended family. Then Mark leaned back in his chair and casually asked, "So, how's married life treating you two? Settling into that budget-friendly lifestyle?" My fork paused halfway to my mouth. I took a slow breath and replied, "We're doing just fine, Mark. We're happy." Daniel nodded beside me, his expression calm but firm. Mark smirked. "Hey, as long as you're happy, just don't expect luxury on a non-profit paycheck," he said with a laugh. My mother shot him a warning look, and my father cleared his throat. The room went quiet for a moment, and I felt that familiar mix of frustration and embarrassment creeping in again. I wanted to say something sharp, something that would finally shut him up, but I stayed silent, not wanting to turn a family dinner into another uncomfortable scene. After dessert, my parents announced they had some paperwork they wanted to discuss with us. "It's nothing bad," my father said, trying to sound casual, "just some family matters." Mark immediately perked up, his interest clearly sparked by the word paperwork. We moved to the living room, where my father placed a thick envelope on the coffee table. He looked at all of us and said, "Your grandmother left some assets that were meant to be handled after certain conditions were met. We've been sorting through everything, and now it's time to finalize a few things." Mark leaned forward, his eyes practically glowing. "Assets?" he repeated. "What kind of assets?"
My mother gave him a look. "Mark, let your father finish." My father opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of documents. "One of the main items is a property your grandmother owned. It's a commercial building near the city center. The deed has been updated according to her wishes." Mark's smile widened. "So, who's getting it?" he asked, eagerly, already imagining his share of the wealth. My father glanced at me, then at Daniel, and finally back at the papers in his hand. "According to your grandmother's will, the property was to go to the grandchild who was most involved in community service and charitable work. She believed in rewarding those who gave back." The room went silent. My heart started to pound as I realized what he was saying. Mark frowned. "Wait, what? That's a strange condition." My mother nodded. "Your grandmother admired your sister's dedication, Mark. She always spoke about how proud she was of the work she did with the nonprofit." I felt my cheeks heat up, not from embarrassment this time, but from shock. "Are you saying—" I began, my voice barely above a whisper. My father handed me the documents. "The property is in your name now. The deed has been transferred to you." Mark shot up from his seat. "That's impossible," he snapped. "There has to be a mistake. I'm the one who understands business. I'm the one who knows how to manage property. She wouldn't just give it to someone who barely makes any money." Daniel placed a steady hand on my back, grounding me as my mind raced. I flipped through the papers, my eyes scanning the official seals and signatures. It was real. The building was mine. My father spoke calmly. "Your grandmother was very clear about her wishes. This isn't about income, Mark. It's about values."
Mark let out a bitter laugh. "Values don't pay the bills," he muttered, the same words he had used at my wedding. "Do you even know what that property is worth?" My father nodded. "Roughly $2.4 million based on the latest valuation." The number hung in the air like a thunderclap. I felt dizzy, my hands trembling as I held the deed. $2.4 million. It was more money than I had ever imagined being connected to my name. Mark's face drained of color. "You're joking," he said, his confident tone gone. "She doesn't even know how to run a business. This is ridiculous." I finally found my voice. "Grandma knew exactly who I was, Mark. She knew what mattered to me." My words were calm, but inside, years of quiet frustration were rising to the surface. He stared at me, disbelief and anger flashing in his eyes. "So the little nonprofit worker gets a multi-million-dollar property and I get nothing?" he snapped. My mother stood up, her voice firm. "Mark, that's enough. This isn't a competition. Your grandmother made her choice." The tension in the room was thick, and I could feel my brother's resentment radiating toward me. For the first time in my life, the balance had shifted. The person who had always looked down on me was now the one struggling to accept reality. As Daniel and I drove home later that night, I stared out the window, still trying to process everything. "I never wanted to prove anything to him," I said softly. "I just wanted to live my life." Daniel smiled gently. "And you did. This isn't about proving him wrong. It's about being true to who you are." But deep down, I knew that Mark wouldn't let this go. His pride had taken a hit, and I could already sense that the real confrontation was still ahead. The deed may have been revealed, but the emotional fallout was just beginning. The days after my parents' announcement were anything but peaceful. Mark didn't call, didn't text, and didn't post his usual flashy updates online. Instead, I heard from other relatives that he was furious, convinced the whole situation was unfair. I tried not to let it bother me, focusing on my work and my new life with Daniel, but I knew sooner or later we'd have to face each other. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. One evening, Mark showed up unannounced at our apartment. His expression was tight, his usual confidence replaced with barely contained frustration. "We need to talk," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Daniel stood beside me, calm but alert. "What's going on, Mark?" he asked. Mark crossed his arms. What's going on is that you don't deserve that property. You don't have the experience, the skills, or the business sense to handle something worth millions. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice steady. Grandma made her decision, Mark. This isn't about skills, it's about trust. He scoffed. Trust? She trusted you because you played the kind, selfless card. Meanwhile, I worked hard to build my career and I get nothing. I met his gaze. You didn't get nothing. You built a life you're proud of. But you also spent years reminding me that my choices weren't good enough. For a moment, he looked taken aback, as if he hadn't expected me to speak so directly. I was just being honest, he muttered. No, I replied quietly. You were being dismissive. You mocked my salary at my own wedding, in front of everyone I love. That wasn't honesty. That was cruelty. The room fell silent. Mark looked away, running a hand through his hair. So what now? You're just going to sit on that property and pretend you earned it? I shook my head. I'm going to use it the way Grandma hoped I would. The building is being leased to local organizations, and part of the income will go toward community programs. It's not about me getting rich, it's about making a difference. Mark laughed bitterly. Of course it is. You always have to make everything about helping people. Daniel stepped in, his voice calm but firm. That's not a flaw, Mark. That's who she is. Mark looked between us, his anger slowly giving way to something else, something quieter. You really think you're better than me now, don't you? He asked. I shook my head again. No, I think we're just different, and that's okay. He stood there for a long moment, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. I guess I didn't see this coming. I always thought success looked a certain way. So did I said softly. But life has a way of surprising us. Mark left without another argument, and for the first time, I felt like I had truly stood up for myself, not with anger, but with honesty. The weight I had carried for years, the constant need to prove my worth, began to lift. In the months that followed, the property started generating steady income, and we used it to support programs that helped families, students, and small community projects. I stayed at my nonprofit job because it still fulfilled me, and Daniel continued his work, proud of the life we were building together. Mark eventually reached out again, this time with a different tone. He congratulated me on how I was managing the property, and even admitted that he admired what I was doing with it. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was more respectful than it had ever been. Looking back, I realized that my wedding night wasn't ruined by my brother's mockery. Instead, it became the moment that revealed what truly mattered. Success wasn't about how much money you made or how impressive your title sounded. It was about staying true to your values, even when others didn't understand them. The $2.4 million deed didn't change who I was. It simply showed everyone else who I had been all along.